The morning sun shone mercilessly over the crowded city street, its heat baking the cracked pavement and glinting off the glass towers that loomed above like silent witnesses. Amid the endless rush of cars, people, and noise, a frail woman sat on the curb, holding a sleeping child in her lap. Her eyes were red, swollen, and tired beyond measure. Her name was Amina, and she had run out of tears. It had been 2 days since she and her daughter had eaten a proper meal. Her hands trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, whispering promises she no longer believed she could keep. "Mommy, don't cry," came a small, trembling voice beside her. It was Nura, her 5-year-old daughter, her eyes bright and innocent despite the hunger that hollowed her cheeks. "Maybe that man will help us," she said, pointing with her tiny hand toward a tall figure stepping out of a sleek black car across the street. The man wore an expensive suit, his shoes shining, his watch gleaming like the sun itself. His name was Zayan Malik, a millionaire businessman known for his success, not his kindness. Pause for a second, before we dive deeper into what happens next. If you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Light of Kindness. It helps spread more stories that remind us how a small act of compassion can turn someone's whole world around. As Amina lifted her head, her tear-streaked eyes followed the man her daughter had pointed to. She felt a wave of shame wash over her. She used to be like the people walking past her now: clean clothes, a steady job, a small apartment filled with laughter and the smell of fresh bread in the morning. But life has a cruel way of turning, and one tragedy can rip apart everything you've built. 2 years ago, her husband, a kind-hearted taxi driver named Farid, had died in an accident. The car that hit him never stopped, and the driver was never found. Amina was left alone, with debts she didn't even know existed, and a little girl to care for. She tried to work. She cleaned houses, washed dishes, and even took night shifts at a small restaurant, but when her landlord sold the building, she had nowhere left to go. For the past 3 weeks, the street had become her home, and her only shelter was her will to protect her daughter Zayan. Meanwhile, didn't notice them at first. He was busy checking his phone, scrolling through messages about meetings, stocks, and upcoming deals. He had built his empire from nothing, clawing his way up from poverty and betrayal. His father had left when he was 8, and his mother had died working multiple jobs to keep him in school. To him, kindness had always seemed like a luxury that life didn't afford. "Work hard or get crushed," was his mantra, and it had served him well, or so he thought. As he stepped into the cafe across the street, a small sound stopped him. A faint cough, followed by a child's soft voice calling, "Mommy, my tummy hurts." He glanced sideways, just for a second, and saw them, Amina clutching her daughter close, trying to comfort her while hiding her tears. Something inside him shifted, like a memory he'd buried deep beneath layers of success and pride. For a moment, he saw his mother again, sitting in the cold, counting coins to buy him dinner. Zayan shook his head, pushing the thought away. He wasn't that man anymore. He had no time for charity cases. But as he turned to walk inside, Nura's eyes met his wide, hopeful, and filled with a kind of trust he hadn't seen in years. That one look pierced through him like sunlight through storm clouds. He walked inside, but the image stayed with him. Even as he ordered his coffee, he couldn't shake the sound of that little voice. Meanwhile, Amina whispered to her daughter, "Sweetheart, not everyone can help. Sometimes, people have their own problems." She forced a smile, brushing Nura's hair gently. But the truth was, she had reached her breaking point. She didn't even have enough coins for a loaf of bread. She had tried the local shelters, but they were full. Every night, she prayed for one miracle, just one, and wondered if God still listened. Minutes later, as Zayan sat by the cafe window, he found himself unable to focus. Outside, the little girl was tracing shapes on the dusty ground with her finger, and the mother sat motionless beside her. Something about the way the child still smiled despite her circumstances stirred something deep in his chest. Against his better judgment, he stood up, grabbed a sandwich and 2 bottles of water from the counter, and walked out. When Amina saw him approach, her body stiffened. Pride and shame battled inside her. "Please, sir, we're fine," she muttered, lowering her gaze. But Zayan crouched down to the girl's level and smiled slightly. "I thought maybe you could share this," he said, handing the food to Nura. The little girl's eyes sparkled like diamonds as she looked up at her mother for permission. Amina hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, sir," Nura whispered. Her voice was so gentle, so full of gratitude, It nearly broke Zion's heart. He stood there for a few seconds longer, unsure what to say next. "Do you live around here?" he asked softly. Amina hesitated, then said, "Not exactly. We're just passing through." She didn't want pity. She didn't want him or anyone to know how far she had fallen. Zion nodded slowly. He didn't push further, but something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. That night, as he sat in his penthouse overlooking the glittering city, he couldn't stop thinking about them. He kept seeing the girl's tiny hand clutching the sandwich, her mother's tired eyes, the quiet dignity they both carried despite their pain. He thought about his own mother again, how she used to tell him, "Never let success make your heart hard." He realized he had forgotten that lesson long ago. The next morning, he returned to the same street. The spot where they had sat was empty. He looked around, scanning the sidewalks, the alleys, the nearby park. Nothing. A strange panic rose in his chest. He asked a vendor nearby if he'd seen a woman and a little girl. The man nodded. Yes, they were here early. The mother fainted, and someone took them to the clinic on 7th Street. Zion rushed there immediately. When he arrived, he saw Amina lying on a bed, pale and weak, and 4 in her arm. Nura sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. "Mommy! It's the man I told you about," she exclaimed. Amina turned her head weakly, surprised to see him. He spoke quietly to the nurse, covering the medical costs without saying a word. When Amina realized what he had done, tears filled her eyes. "You didn't have to, we can't repay you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Zion said simply. "Just get better." Over the next few days, he visited them often. He brought food, clothes, and a warm smile that grew more genuine each time. He learned their story piece by piece, about Farid's death, the debts, and the endless nights on the street. Each detail struck him like a blow, reminding him of his own mother's struggles. One evening, as he sat by Amina's hospital bed, he said quietly, "You remind me of her. My mother. She was strong, just like you." For the first time in years, Amina smiled. "Then she must have been a good woman," she said softly. Zion nodded, his eyes glistening. "She was. And I failed to live like she taught me. Until now." A week later, when Amina was discharged, Zion had already made arrangements. He found her a small apartment near the park, a job at one of his company's offices, and a school for Nura. When she protested, saying she couldn't accept so much, he told her, "You're not accepting charity. You're accepting a chance. The same kind I once needed." Slowly, their lives began to heal. Nura thrived in school, her laughter echoing through their new home. Amina found purpose again, working hard and earning respect for her dedication. Zion continued to visit, not as a savior but as a friend, someone who had rediscovered the humanity he had long buried beneath his wealth. One sunny afternoon, months later, Nura ran up to him in the park, holding a small drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, Amina, Nura, and Zion, standing under a bright sun with the words "Our Family of Kindness" scrawled underneath. He looked at it for a long moment, then knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "That's beautiful, Nura," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, and for the first time in many years, Zion felt peace. True peace, the kind that comes not from wealth, but from love, compassion, and connection. Amina stood nearby, watching with tears in her eyes. She whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, not for the money or the apartment, but for the miracle of human kindness that had found her when she was on the edge of despair. Before we close this story, if it touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Let's keep spreading the message that kindness can change lives, one small act at a time. Subscribe to Light of Kindness for more stories that restore faith in humanity.